Hi, my name is Gavin. I'm a third grader at Hillsdale. You're listening to the West Data Podcast.
And kids, right, they can't see past what's happening in front of them right now. But
Right.
we as adults know, like that high school diploma, like life is not going to get any easier.
Right.
If you leave West Data, you leave us and you don't have that diploma. So I think, having that out of the box thinking and the ability to be flexible in that setting is key for kids.
And that's the fun part, right? When I get to shake their hand at graduation, I'm like, I remember that time you were about to peace out on
bail.
it.
Yeah.
And so that's where that whole process from beginning to end is really cool.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the West
So
Ada
good.
podcast. And we are talking alternative education today. And Katie, super fun conversation.
I mean, every single kid in our district has
Yeah.
ample opportunity to succeed. And I want to cry. I always want to cry. But I'm just so happy that these opportunities exist for our kids.
Yeah. Well, Kristen Haener joins us. She is the administrator of alternative education. And then Mike Hanneman, long time. He's been the principal at Rebound
since it opened.
for the last 14 years since it opened. One quick story about Mike. I first met him. We do our We Are West Ada Awards at the end of every school year. Well, at the end of 2023, he was named the High School Admin of the Year. And
it's a surprise. He didn't know.
It's a total surprise. I put a camera in his face, and I knew he didn't want to be on camera, but I also saw the love that he has for kids, and I'm like, oh, that dude is awesome. So anyway, I'm just so thankful that he and Kristen could be here and join us for this conversation.
It's a great conversation, and you'll want to know and listen. And even if you don't think your kids might be a candidate for alternatives, one of our alternative schools, it really is a great opportunity, a great option.
Well, we love that you are here for this conversation. Enjoy. Here we go.
Well, we're about to have a phenomenal conversation with two educators with probably the biggest hearts around. We have Mike Hanneman and Kristen Haener. Thank you for joining us today, you guys.
No problem.
Great
Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you all here. Well, if you don't mind, let's do a little bit of background stuff. Kristen, you've been with West Ada since '98. You were telling us earlier. What's your journey been like?
So I like to say that I'm West Data. I'm homegrown because, I started here with my student teaching and got hired on. And I've taught all secondary, middle school, and high school. Landed most recently at Meridian High as an assistant principal for the last 9 years, and then stepped into this position this year with the alternative schools.
So it's a new position.
It is a new position this year.
Are you drinking from the fire hose, or what's that kind of been like? Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride so far. I think for myself and the schools that I've been working with. So it's nice though. I think they feel like they're getting a little bit of the attention they deserve. They've always fallen underneath another secondary director, and the big six, as we like to call them, the big six traditional schools. They are busy places and take a lot of the director's time. So the alternative schools, I think, knowing that they have someone at the district that's for them has really, I think, been a great thing.
That's got to be a nice change for them. Yeah, I would think.
And that's your role, right? Administrator of alternative education.
Correct.
Okay, so that's all. So you purely support our alternative programs.
Yes.
Very
Awesome.
Cool. Very cool. Well, Mike, and same for you. I mean, you've been, I can't believe you've been at Rebound for 14 years.
I can't believe it either. Actually.
Just briefly, your background. How did you get started? All that stuff.
Well, so I moved up from out of state and had taught special ed for 6 years out of state, and then came here and taught special ed for 4 years at Meridian High School, which was awesome. And then that kind of parlayed me into this position, right? I just got really good at working with kids that needed extra help.
Yeah.
So I kind of moved over to Rebound, and I was like the lead teacher there for 2 years, and then kind of got promoted to dean of students at Rebound for 2 more years, and then moved into being a principal at Rebound. So I've been there 14 years. I've been there from beginning to now. So
that's wild.
It's quite an evolution.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
How different is it from going from teaching to being more of an administrative role? How different is that?
It's definitely different. I will say that I had some nice transition points, right? But it's a totally different animal for sure.
Now I'm curious because Rebound, so we have Rebound School of Opportunity, and then we have a bunch of academies. Is there a difference? And was that intentional? Did Rebound predate academies, or was there a reason for that when it came about?
No, so really the academies have been around a long time. They've been around before Rebound, but the initial intent of Rebound was to focus on potential dropout kids and dropout kids, right?
Okay.
And so that was the initial intent. And then some in lieu of expulsion kids that we try to help through some tough times. But that was the initial intent on Rebound. And when I first started at Rebound, honestly, we probably had like 30 or 40 kids. It was a tiny little thing that we just really grew and grew and grew.
Yeah.
But that's the initial intent.
So now today, is Rebound and our other academies, are they aligned and offering similar opportunities and programs, or are they still pretty different?
Well, I guess they're similar and different, right? Okay. We're all alternative schools, of course.
Sure, yeah.
But really in the pyramid of how our pyramid of interventions go, it's the big 6 high schools, right?
Right.
And they have tons of interventions that they do and try to help kids. But when some of those options are running low, then we try to get them to an academy. And then the academy has a ton of interventions that they're doing to help kids, right? And then really the next option, if the academies and the big 6 aren't working, was really supposed to be Rebound. Yeah. And so it's kind of, if you think of it like a pyramid, that's kind of how it's supposed to be.
That's super. And I don't know why I never thought to ask before. I just assumed they were all the same, but that's why we're here, right? To clarify.
And I always say this. So my kids went all the way through West Ada, and I was, for a lot of years before I started working for the district, I was a dumb parent. I mean, that's just me. Yeah. I didn't know about our academies. Alternative education. Let's define terms. Kristen, do you mind? Can you kind of define from a larger perspective alternative education? And Mike has already outlined how we do things here. But can you expand on that? What is alternative education for those listening?
So alternative education at the academies, because it looks a little bit different at Rebound. For our 3 academies, it's mastery-based learning, and so students are not bound by seat time as opposed to a traditional school.
Sure.
Students are in a class for 18 weeks a semester and whatnot. At the Academy in Mastery Learning, the students, they can move through a course as quickly as they can master the material, the content, the standards that they're being asked to learn during that time. So the kids, they talk a lot about voice and choice. Kids can pick the classes, or they're not even classes, they're technically called portfolios that they're working on.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay.
It's a whole different system. When a student comes in who hasn't been successful in a traditional setting, I think it can be a little bit of a relief to know that, I can work on a class, and if it takes me a little bit longer, that's okay. But if I'm, very interested in a content area, or I'm a math whiz, I can really buzz through my math credit requirements pretty quickly. So they're mastery-based learning at our academies. So it is an online platform where they do a lot of the work, but they're set up with mentors. Every teacher is a mentor. Every student is assigned a mentor. They start their day with their mentor. So there's a lot of individual attention and planning that goes into a student's journey while they're at the academy. Okay. And, if you would look at what the state identifies a student who should attend an alternative school, a lot of the label of at risk, and they have some indicators that they've failed so many courses, attendance, some of those issues come into it. Maybe they're on an IEP or a 504, some of those guidelines. I would say, though, since the pandemic, I think education as a whole has changed.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And so, we get, with that came just a different, I think, clientele to the academies. With some of the after effects of the pandemic and what that looks like for kids.
Well, and you mentioned a couple so I'm learning to speak education, but you said IEPs and 504s. Can you define that?
Sure. So an IEP is an individualized education plan for a student that's special education, which may or may not be working for them in a traditional setting. And a 504 is another plan that can be put in place for a student. It doesn't have all of the guidelines and protections of an IEP, but it does allow some accommodations for students who maybe academically they're doing all right, but maybe they have some health, physical health or mental health issues that they're struggling with. And so a 504 can be put in place. It's kind of we would usually put a 504 in place before an IEP, a qualifier student for special education.
Okay. Well, and I love that you're that we're meeting students where they are, because we know humans are different, right? We're beautiful and creative and diverse, and to be able to meet students how they learn best. And that's one of the great things about school choice. And I think maybe you were alluding to that a bit with COVID, that where kids maybe needed to come like more at risk prior. Now it may be that students are just choosing that environment because it's how they learn best, right?
Correct. And also, I think it has to do with, we hear a lot about anxiety with kids.
Sure. Oh,
you know,
yeah.
returning to a big school with 1,800 students, you know, large class sizes, crowded hallways, you know, a traditional, a traditional high school.
Really?
It's, you know, it's, so that is, anxiety plays a big part of what we're seeing. I know sometimes the stigma of those kids at the academies, maybe when we were in school, those, you know, discipline problems, they were the naughty kids, the kids that were in trouble all the time and weren't, so it's really changed. I have some conversations with parents oftentimes who are concerned about sending or referring their kid to an academy because they're worried. They say, I don't want my student around those kinds of kids. And today's world, those kids are everywhere.
100%.
Guaranteed right now they're sitting next to your student in their English class. At, you know, so that is not the only type of student. Kids cannot be successful at a traditional high school for many reasons.
Right,
I was talking to a dear friend recently who we were kind of in a social setting, and I know that her daughter goes to an academy, and somebody else, one of the other moms, is like, well, I just don't know why parents send their, you know, to be around those kids. And my friend stood up and she was just like, guess what? My daughter is one of those kids, and she's getting the best help she's had in the district, and they're supporting her and she's learning. And I was like, you know, like clapping for her, because it is, and it's not. Why would we? Those kids, they're all our kids, right? Mike, I know you have a heart for this. You let us hear it.
That would drive me nuts right there. Hearing that, I would be like, whoa, slow down.
Time out.
Let me give you a little background on some of this, because it's not like that. It really isn't. Honestly, it's just a smaller environment where we can put the attention and focus individually on student needs, right? And so, and going back to the naughty kids, the behaviors, like honestly, there's really not that many going on. People would probably be surprised. I mean, of course, we have some.
Well, there's always stuff.
There's always something.
There's always
stuff at every school. But
honestly,
we start building relationships with kids and we work through those things together, and it's a different style. I'll just say that, right? Well, it's like, you know, come on, we help kids all the time, right?
And if I kind of
different walks of life
shift back to my role as an assistant principal, working with Mike with students, you know, Rebound, it focuses a lot on juniors and seniors, as it should. I think keeping you know, some of that original intent, but those seniors who are they're just not going to make it in time to stay with their 4-year graduation cohort. So I would often tell kids, you know, there are students at Rebound for all kinds of different reasons. And sometimes it's just the schedule, the daily schedule. Maybe they have to work. They're so close to graduation. They want to just, you know, bust out the credits. It's a half-day schedule at Rebound, so kids can come either in the morning or the afternoon, and maybe they have to work. Maybe they could go 40 hours. Maybe they just want to be done. They just want to get through their classes and be done and go to work or go start college. Or
maybe they just like to sleep in till 11. But it works, right?
My kid likes to do that, and she's going to Mountain View, so I'm not.
It happens.
Right,
So it's, you know, I had that conversation a lot with students and with parents about letting them know it's not like what we grew up with.
It's
very different. It's very, very different.
Well, Mike, for you, I mean, when a kid or a family's just getting into the whole idea of going to Rebound, how do you approach that? I mean, what does that kind of look like?
Perfect. So here's what we do. So I think it's really important we do intake meetings with every single student that comes to Rebound, every kid. So when they're on the fence or they're not totally sure, or like vice principals at the school will have conversations, just kind of, you know, put it out there. Then we get a referral from the homeschool. We call that parent and we schedule an intake meeting and we walk them through everything. And I think that's just critical to do, right? It gets rid of some misconceptions, and also it gives them their expectations on what what this is going to look like, how it's going to look, how can we help you, and then get their input, right? They're all individual, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure,
one situation with one student, it's totally different at the next intake, right? And so we really use that information to help plan what's going to work best for them. And so it's perfect. It sets them up for success. And then they have a couple days to think about it. And we start all our new kids each Monday. So on Monday, then we meet them at the gate. So the staff will be up front at the gate and they'll meet their kids and they'll take them back to their lab and just ease them in, because I don't know if you've ever gone to a place that you're uncomfortable with or it's different.
Yeah.
Like for me, I want somebody to make me mellow out, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like Ken did
100%.
today for the podcast.
I didn't give you a Mountain Dew, but I tried to make you feel comfortable.
I don't know if I
I'm
can be on Mountain Dew in the podcast, but it's super important, right? Like build the relationship with the families, build the relationship with the kids, get the inside information on what's going to make you tick and help make you successful, and then start it off fresh and clean. It's the best.
Okay, well, sorry to jump in real quick, but and I'm kind of jumping ahead. But one of the cool things about my job is I get to go to all the different graduations, and hands down, last year, you guys, I mean, I'm getting chills even thinking about this. But when I was in the room at the Rebound graduation, I'm seriously, I'm getting chills. I don't know if you can see it on camera, if you're listening, or what. The relationship building. You could tell just the energy in that room. Can you talk about that? Because it was packed. It was standing room only. Can you tell me about that?
I'll tell you what, man. All of our graduations are spectacular. They are. But last year's was just it went even to a new level. I mean, it was packed. Like the whole building was packed. The energy was awesome. It was by far my favorite graduation of all time, by far. But even being up there and kind of running the graduation, the energy that I was feeling from the kids and the families and the crowds, and in process and then after, I'm like, well, every graduation is important for every kid at every school, but our kids have to go through so much and so many hills and valleys to get to that point. I could just feel that explosion of energy.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like I was in a concert there for a minute. I was like, all right, here we go.
It's a celebration. It really is. Those kids have worked hard.
I'll put a link in the show notes so that people can actually go and watch some of that celebration or whatever. But sorry to interrupt you, Kristen, but why is it a celebration?
Well, I think first of all, when Mike talks about the relationships with the kids, every adult in that setting at the school, Mike himself, I think the kids genuinely know those adults care about them.
Right.
And a lot of them worked really, really hard for those kids.
Sure.
And so, the fact that they have made it to that mark with everything that has gotten them to Rebound, it's really incredible that they have, because at one point, guaranteed that a lot of those kids probably thought, I'm not going to get my high school diploma.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm not going to make it. This is not in, I'm going to have to go get my GED or drop out. So the fact that they're there and they're celebrating and they get that opportunity to walk the stage, I think it's very big cause to celebrate. So.
Well, I think graduation's super awesome. We jumped from intake to graduation.
Sorry, there's
a lot in between. But I mean, I just have to give you some kudos, Mike, that intake is so important, because I'm trying to think, I'm putting on my mom hat here and trying to, your most important goal is to support your kids, help them grow and be educated, right? And getting to come to you and have somebody sit with you and say, you know what, we can help you. Where maybe they come to you hopeless, but they leave hopeful. And I think that's a really special thing. Do you see a dip in momentum that you and the mentors are like, all right, come on, we got to keep this going?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending battle, right? The whole year we're progress monitoring kids and we're watching them, and we can watch attendance too, right? You start seeing, they usually start out pretty strong, but then, so we got to stay focused the whole time.
Yeah. And I will say all of the academies do intake meetings as well. And that is really a time where they can sit down with parents and explain, the mastery learning piece, because that also too might not be for everyone. So they make sure parents fully understand like what a student's day looks like at the academy. They go through and they say that, just like Mike does, like you do need to come to school just because we are an online platform. Your attendance counts, because attendance across the board has been an issue. So it's a good time to really set expectations and also get to know the student coming in with that. So I think, I don't know who was doing it first or if it's always been that way, but it's a really great part of right at the Big Six. It might look like today's freshman orientation and we're going to put all 500 freshmen in the gym or in the auditorium and we do it, but in the masses. In this setting, it's very individualized.
West Data is proud to partner with Purposity, a platform that connects community members to the specific needs of our students and families. Through Purposity, you can make a direct impact by fulfilling essential needs like clothing, school supplies, and hygiene items. Join us in spreading kindness and making a lasting impact by signing up at purposity.com. You'll find the link in today's show notes.
Kristen, when we left off with you talking about intake and mastery education, how do we ensure that the academies really are the best fit for each student that attends there?
Well, it's usually a series of steps that starts with the traditional high school, right?
Sure.
There's conversations that are happening
Sure.
there between the teachers, the counselor, and usually the students' administrator, assistant principal. So there's some identifying factors there that happen in conversations there that happen typically with mostly the counselor at the traditional school, explaining that it's a smaller setting. The day looks completely different for students. They don't have, 4 block periods. They start with
Sure.
a mentoring period and then they might go to a math class or an English class, but then they have some flex time in the afternoon. So it just looks very different. And that conversation starts at the traditional 6. And then once they've submitted an application, it then goes to the academy where that intake meeting is then set up. However, before that intake meeting, there's a lot of eyes that are on that student, between the administrator at the academy, their counselor, if need be a special education teacher, a nurse. They're looking at everything about the student, a lot of moving parts, a lot of conversations. Sometimes there's some follow-up between staff between academy and a traditional school before, we're going to call the parent, but hey, what info can you share with us so that we know why the student is coming to us. So that there's that happens to make sure that we are going to, do then try and get the next level of success for that student.
And just to clarify, though, you say there's all these moving parts and caring adults who want best for the student. Are students allowed to, if a student said, I'm doing fine at one of the Big Six, but I really think I might be more successful, or I think the academy model is best for me, can they self-select, or is it really something that needs to come from administration?
They can self-select for whatever reason. It might get a little trickier if an academy is full. We do run into certain times of the year where they're kind of at capacity.
Okay, I was wondering about that.
It can be a wait list. Right now, the academies, they're working hard to make sure that they don't have a wait list. I think we're in the process of taking a look at some of the systems we have in place, and as Mike was referring to, is from a Big Six academy and then from academy to Rebound if needed. And so making sure that is happening as well when we look at students. So.
Well, and I've got to imagine that class size really matters. I mean, Mike, from your perspective, I know that most of our academies try and keep class size around 20 or so, and 175-ish is kind of where we want to cap things. Why does class size matter from your perspective?
Well, it kind of goes back to the individualized, giving each student the attention they need. So it is really important, right? So that because they have some higher needs that we need to make sure we're always focused on sometimes, right?
Right.
And so I think that's really important to have that balance. And when I've taken rebound numbers pretty high in certain years, and so when you get really high numbers, then it gets diluted just a little bit.
So you've tried to find that sweet spot over the last 14 years or whatever.
Yep. And so last year was one of the higher years. That's one of the reasons we had 116 graduates, right?
Oh, wow.
So we were teetering in.
Mike doesn't say no.
He's
always
He sees the possibility.
He wants those kids in there.
Or if he initially does, you can usually talk him in. Yes.
Well, the way I look at it is I would like to take a crack at this situation. And if I look at it like that on every situation, I'll be able to solve most of those problems. But so 250 is where we were sitting at towards the end of the last year.
Oh, so that's more than 175.
That's a lot.
Right. Yeah, sure,
That was
obviously.
a lot. I think the happy zone is like 180 to 220.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Now-
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
Just sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. And we'll get situations too where, say, a student is, so I guess I should explain the way the academies are aligned within our district. Meridian Academy takes students from Mountain View and Meridian High.
Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying.
Central
Yeah.
Academy
Yeah.
takes Rocky Mountain and Owyhee kids, and Eagle Academy takes Eagle and Centennial. Now, if there's room in an academy and, say, a Mountain View kid, there's no room at Meridian, they can apply then to go to one of the other academies that might have room.
Okay.
And sometimes kids who are really struggling, again, just a phone call to Mr. Hanneman will be like, hey, can this kid, come over to Rebound while they're waiting to get into an academy? So that might be another path to an alternative education for a kid that's not being successful at the. What's hard, though, is if a student comes to Rebound or they come to an academy and they're doing very well and they're like, I want to go back to my high school. That doesn't translate so well within our district because our academies do work on the 46 credits that the state requires, whereas our district operates off of 56 credits.
Can you expand on that a little
Yeah.
bit? So the state kind of sets the criteria. Can you kind of give us the background there and what that looks like?
Yeah, so the state requires 46 high school credits to graduate. And I was before my time as to why the decision was made at Rebound. You might know because you've been there since the beginning.
I don't remember why they went to 56, but
the
I
state
do
because
remember
of block schedule.
Right,
I mean,
the
the
block.
district
Yes.
because of block
Correct.
scheduling.
But I do remember when because Rebound initially was on the 56, and I do remember when Rebound and the academies shifted to the state requirement of 46. It was one of the greatest things that's ever happened to alternative ed.
And that 10 credit difference is made up with electives.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. So
Okay.
they still have the same English, math,
the core
science.
stuff
The core
is
is
there.
all the same. Yes.
Okay.
But
Okay.
they make up that difference. And yes, Katie, you're correct. The 56 comes from because West State is on a block schedule and the way it works out for requiring kids for 56. So when students choose to go to Rebound and Academy or really even Virtual Schoolhouse, they've then kind of set their trajectory for a 46 credit graduation.
And that's why it doesn't translate.
It
going
doesn't
back.
translate
I
back
see.
going back so
Okay.
well. So when Mike takes, but oftentimes kids get to Rebound and then they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
We were just
getting
telling one
hooked.
with the other day, and I was like, "Hey, can you speak to the student? Do they still want to come to the academy?" And he emailed me. He's like, "No, she wants to stay."
Well, those 10 credits can make a difference, right?
Yeah.
We want our kids to graduate with a high school diploma.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're faced with, 10 more credits, maybe I'm just going to get my GED. So I think that's huge. And
Well, and if you think back on how they qualify to be at an at-risk school, they're generally behind in credits,
Right.
right?
So they're already behind the eight ball.
They're already
Yeah.
behind.
Yeah.
So
you
back
gotta-
in the day when it was 56, they were already behind the eight ball, even for 46, but they still had to get 56. So moving to the 46 has been awesome, right?
Okay.
And we're really
Okay.
we're just getting rid of some electives. The core is still
Yeah.
there and in place. So.
Well, sorry. Go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, I was going to say
apologize.
that just might be a good time to bring up the CTE part of it. And
100%, yeah,
And
yeah.
we do allow students, because when they're in a traditional school, they can take a CTE pathway. There's lots in West Ada. Welding, auto tech, diesel just might be some that, those are just three. Some students who are at risk that's the one thing that holds them back from going to an alternative setting because they think they have to drop out of that pathway. And for some of those kiddos, we know that could be a real career option.
Sure.
They're graduating with
Yeah.
a certification. They can go on and really be successful in that. So I don't know how long ago, but we just at one point said, hey, you know what? You can still go to Rebound. You can go to the academy, and you can stay in your CTE
Which I'm sure is
pathway.
huge for those kids.
It's
and
really
their
because, man,
families.
those
Yeah.
kids, especially when they're in Welding 3 and Welding 4, those kids, they like it. They're dedicated.
They've been doing it for a while. Yeah, all the things.
Yeah, and it's something that they want to stay in. And so allowing that flexibility, I think it's just one more piece in West Ada that we work really hard for kids, for getting them to be, like we talk about, successful humans
Yeah.
in
Right.
society once they leave West Ada.
Well, and college and career ready, right?
yes.
If that's our goal, then
Yep.
we're going to make sure they can be college and career ready.
Yeah.
Love it.
Mike, real quick, I just want to circle back a little bit because I think I'm picking up on a key difference between academies and Rebound. Rebound is a virtual platform. Do they have the opportunity, Kristen mentioned, maybe going to an English class or a math class. Do students have the opportunity for small group instruction?
For like live instruction?
Yeah.
So the only live group instruction we have is for our interventions. So math and ELA interventions, targeted, focused learning.
Okay.
Those are the only live classes. Our platform's always been the online model, right? But with the relationship in person, correct. The mentors and actually all the teachers are in our building too. So if you ever come to Rebound, you'll see teachers pulling kids, and you'll see teachers in the labs, and then you'll see lines of kids going to teachers too. It's like a revolving door. But yeah.
Because if I'm working on my math course and I have a question, I can go talk to the math teacher there in the building. So there's there's that live
Correct.
support.
Correct.
So you got
And
someone you
there's-
can go talk
Yeah,
to.
there's
Correct.
just not scheduled like I'm in my
right.
math class with my math teacher.
So it is online, right? But they
Sure.
have their online math teacher right there in the building. So if online, right? There's that touch that's missing, right? And so all
The
they gotta-
relationship
yep.
thing.
And then really sometimes they just need a whiteboard, right? Let me just work some stuff out with the students on the whiteboard.
Well, so is that the mentor thing, or is the mentor thing different? Can you describe that? What's that process look like?
Well, I can tell you how the mentor thing at Rebound is
Sure.
similar, but at Rebound, the mentors are more progress monitoring, goal setting,
Cheerleading.
Encouraging, yeah. Sure,
sometimes
sure.
behavior management also.
Oh, of course.
Where the teachers are more focused on instruction and watching the online class for kids struggling, because a lot of times kids won't reach out
Yeah.
to adults or teachers or online, right? Especially with online
100%,
teachers. So
yeah.
it's our teacher's job to watch the data and go target
And just
specific.
ping them,
Yep,
maybe. Okay.
Correct. So that our mentor's job is more, like I said, the cheerleader and the goal setting and the focus part. But I'm not sure how the academy.
At the academy, it's all
honest.
of that. It's all of that and then some. A mentor, they get assigned a group of students, anywhere from 15 to 20 students, and then they're
Right,
really,
right.
to put it in traditional setting words, is they're really case managing those kids. They're looking at the whole student. Their student starts their day with them. They're doing from right beginning of the year goal setting, maybe study skill. Organization. They're covering everything with the students. Their day starts every day with a check-in, like, how are you today?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well, yeah.
Then the kid might say, well, I got really mad at, Johnny on the bus. And it's like, okay, so that's how we know your day started.
Yeah.
And
Need to
so,
bring it down a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah. And then they're progress monitoring. They're the ones who are reaching out to the kids, like, I haven't seen you in 3 days. Want to make sure everything's okay. What's going on? Or, okay, I noticed that you're not doing so well in your math portfolio. So they're managing the whole student. As their responsibility then that's what you sign up for when you agree to
Sure.
be a teacher. You're so much more than just teaching your content at an academy with students.
And, sometimes, I would assume some of our students at academies or Rebound are maybe dealing with some stuff, right? Like they come to school with some things that maybe they need extra support with. How do we still ensure that we're providing those wraparound services that we'd provide to every student in the district? What does that look like with counselors or social workers and that kind of thing?
Well, identifying those needs. Oftentimes, those have been identified before they even get
Right.
to
They're
us.
already in place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they just continue on. Really, the social workers within our district for students who might be struggling in that realm with homelessness or food insecurity, anything like that. Our social workers are amazing when it comes to that. So that work just continues on in the academy setting. And I often tell parents, and I think anyone who works at an academy will tell you too, every student gets those supports, kind of whether they need it or not.
Right.
Every student is being monitored. Every student is getting one-on-one attention. Every student in that setting has multiple eyes on them from an adult, making sure that they're okay.
Right.
That they're. Those teachers they'll hand out some fruit snacks like no other if a kid is needed. It's
Whatever
it's
you
just a
need.
smaller setting, and there's
Yeah.
so many adult eyes on there, and those teachers receive training in that area on mentoring. So it just is, every kid gets those support. Oftentimes, special education and IEPs land in an academy, and when you look through some of the accommodations that have been put in place, it's like, well, we're doing that for every kid.
Yeah.
So it's, it just works well in that setting.
Well, I think you said something earlier about, what teachers do. Teachers aren't just teaching the content stuff. I don't know, Mike, what teacher is successful at Rebound? I mean, what kind of mentality do you have to bring to that role?
So the two things off the top of my head right away, definitely have to be flexible. Sure. Right? You definitely got to have some flexibility. You got to
go to plan B or whatever.
You got to roll with things sometimes, and kids could be having a bad day. I mean, there's lots of different. You got to be flexible, and then back to the relationship piece. You got to be a pro at building those relationships, and that happens with a lot of different strategies, right? It's not just, hey, how you doing, and we're going to start a relationship. Sometimes it will take weeks and weeks and weeks of work. I can remember a Meridian High kid that came over to us, and it took me probably 6 or 8 weeks of working with that kid to finally break in. And so there's all these strategies that help. So those are the two things that I feel that make alternative teachers successful. The content, they all have the content knowledge, right? They all have a certificate in one of the areas. It's those two other pieces that are critical, in my opinion.
And often, I've worked in teacher preparation, and you can't teach disposition or a heart, and you can pretty quickly identify the heart of a teacher, and I'm sure you do that in your interviews when you're hiring, right?
Definitely. And it's funny, it really goes back to the intake thing. Like when I come into an intake, I'm like shaking kids' hands, like, "What's up, man? How you doing?"
Go.
Like it's not all.
It's not negative. It's
correct.
Not,
hey, how
punitive.
you doing? And just get them all fired up about what we got going. And I kind of expect the teachers to do that also, right?
Yeah.
Like
attitude matters.
Yep. And the first person they see, they need to be welcomed, and we try to welcome kids every single day, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure the academies do that too, and super important, right? It starts the whole day with a good setting.
Yeah.
I want to go to Rebound.
Come to Rebound. Let's go.
Well, listen, I'm totally shifting gears here, Kristen. So you can say, Ken, that's a dumb question. But our middle schools, we got a couple of middle schools also. I assume that most of what we're talking about here applies at the middle school level as well. Is that a correct assumption? What does that look like?
To some degree, it does. They don't operate on mastery learning. They are following the middle school curriculum.
Okay.
Same.
Okay.
They have our academies do work on a block schedule.
Okay.
But the students are still doing traditional math, English, just as they would. They just get longer to do it.
These are
one
the
of
middle schools. Okay.
Correct. Yes. And there's an application process. I think those classes are even smaller than the academies. Right. Yeah. So, and I think, our traditional middle schools have really great supports in places. It's not always identified. It's a little bit harder to say, my middle schooler needs an alternative setting. I think that just like we're gonna stick this out. As with most things in education, when we get into high school, sometimes the writing on the wall with kids is a little bit clearer.
Right.
Parents.
Well, just time, right?
Yeah, and parents are like, I've been dealing with this. We've been doing this.
Yeah.
This has been a struggle, and when you get to high school, it counts. Those credits, like you are working towards. It's not that I get to flunk English credit and I move on to sophomore English.
Yeah.
You do, but guess what? You also now you get to retake. You have to take English 9 again because you have to pass. It's a state requirement. So once that we get to a spot where our credits are counting and they're counting towards graduation,
that's a different thing.
It is. It's the parents kind of shift their thinking a little bit.
So now the middle schools, is it elementary school eyes on these kids? Like, hey, I think they might be a good fit for one of our alternative middle schools.
That's
like,
one of the things that we're working on is at that 5th grade level is identifying kids who might be successful at the 6th grade level at an academy. Our 6th grade levels, though, are typically our smallest numbers at the middle school because they like to give that 6th grade year a shot in the middle school. 7th and 8th, I think by then it gets a little bit stronger and those enrollments are higher. Just I think the need is identified. And again, maybe that the parents start to see like this setting isn't working for my student. So they come on over. It's a smaller setting, smaller classes, longer class periods because they do work on a block schedule the same as the high schools. It's just, things that are, again, when we're looking at that, because I think after the pandemic, we had to look at everything differently. Yeah. And
there's some positives there, right? I mean, everyone had to kind of shift, as we say in Arkansas, shift their paradigm a little bit, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? Go to YouTube, search West Ada School District, and like and subscribe today.
Well, you guys, I kind of want to talk about what success looks like. I mean, because what's the scoreboard, right? We're always in education, or we're looking at scoreboards. What does success look like? I mean, how do you balance student growth, achievement scores? Because as you said earlier, Mike, you're looking at every individual is different, but yet we still have to have scoreboards. What does that look like from your perspective?
Well, of course, there's the achievement portion of this,
Right.
which we definitely take a deep dive in that using MTSS. We look at the data and we look at achievement and how students are doing and where do we need to focus on. So that is definitely a piece of this. But I learned this a long time ago. It's like, what exactly is success, right? And so I learned a long time ago that success for one kid is different than success for another kid,
Sure.
right? And I had these discussions in my early principal days. I'll never forget them because like we'd have a student that would only finish 1 or 2 classes in a time period. However, and I would have this conversation. They'd be like, well, maybe this kid's not a good fit. And then I would always have to come back like, hold on, that kid finished 0 classes all of last year. Right. So if that kid can finish 2 classes, that's
so we've gone from here
well,
to here.
you know, it's steps, right? So that's a successful student right there, right? And then we work on the next phase, right? And we bring them to the next level. So like that one, it really does go back to the individualized thing, you know, keeping achievement scores in the back of our mind too, because that's always a focus. But.
Well, it matters, yeah.
And quickly before we move on, just for folks who don't know, MTSS, multiple tier.
It's a multi-tier system of support.
Multi-tiered system of support. You mentioned MTSS,
Yep,
so I want to
that's
make sure
good
folks
point,
know
good
about
point.
I'm
that.
still learning educationese. I don't. Yeah. Well, okay, I mean, Kristen, same thing for you. What from your perspective? What does success look like? How do we measure that? How do we get there?
I think at the high school level, if they're moving towards graduation, if they're earning credits, if you'll walk into any one of our academies, anytime a student earns a credit, they celebrate the credit, the finishing that portfolio, that class. At Meridian Academy, when you walk in, their front office and main hallway is just, by the end of the year, will be covered because each kid gets a ticket when they finish a credit. When you walk in, it's celebrating earning that credit towards graduation. I think that is a huge part of high school, secondary education, is they're moving towards graduation. When we look at it academically, no, successful in other areas, absolutely. Kind of what Mike was saying. You know, a kid that maybe back at their traditional school only showed up to school once a week, and now they're showing up 3 days a week. You know, we're going to shoot for that. We're showing up every day, but it's just, you know, it's progress. I think success looks like when a student is making progress in whatever way. Sometimes just, you know, getting up and coming to school. That they were successful that day, because that's a struggle for some kids.
Well, okay, so standardized testing is a big thing. Does the state have different measures or different expectations? Does the district have different expectations? Or are our students who we're providing this individualized education for still required to meet these standardized boxes that they don't necessarily fit in?
They are. Yes, they are. Yeah, we haven't changed any of that for them, that we're still measured by that. I think we do take a bigger look at our 5-year graduation cohort, you know, instead of just our 4-year graduation cohort, we look at that. And what a cohort is specified by any student that starts their freshman year with West Ada, then that's the clock starts ticking for that 4-year cohort.
Okay.
And so we like to really pay attention to that 5-year cohort, because many of these kids were behind.
Sure.
And they may not be moving at the same pace. So, you know, graduating in 5 years, it's just as, you know, it's the same diploma as it was when you graduated in 4 years.
Yeah.
So.
And we do really celebrate growth, right?
Yes.
And maybe you didn't meet this benchmark, but you grew 1, 2, 3 years. That's something to be celebrated.
Absolutely.
I know, you know, in the past, I saw a student who, in one of the iReady, it's one of the benchmarks that the Big Six are using, a student was very low. I think he was scoring like first grade level in one of his math. By the end of the year, he was scoring 8th grade. He was a 10th grader. So was still not scoring on grade level.
Huge
but that is a
year.
huge amount. Like you have to recognize that for all of West Ada, just not Academy kids. Like Mike said, growth just it's progress. I mean, that kid grew a ton. He didn't make proficiency,
Right.
but
Yeah.
like you are on the right path. And for you, it just needs to that celebration looks a little different, but.
Well, and not to belabor the point, but again, at risk, those kids, all the things we've talked about already, but to get them to think differently and to see the world differently. I mean, I know that's the goal. How do you do that?
Well, there's lots of different ways to do that, but it's tricky for sure. Building, like we talked about culture. I think
Right.
that's a big step in the right direction, right? Building the school culture, having kids feel like they belong and they're important and we see them every day. I think that's a big piece of doing it. Got to develop that culture.
Community, all the things.
Yeah, and I would add to that is some of the students that want to go to an alternative setting, you know, a lot of trust has been broken with the adults in their, you know, they've just haven't maybe had a great experience in their educational journey so far. And when I think through their experience at the academy, it's just slowly building trust. Those were the building relationships, but building trust. Because we don't always hold kids to the same. Some things in the big 6 high schools are very black and white. You know, they're some of the rules and the guidelines that we have are very black and white.
Because they need to be because of numbers and different things, right?
Right. That's how our system works.
Right,
That's how our system works. And when we get them to the academy setting and we tell them it's going to be different, then it needs to be different.
Right.
We have to. Sometimes there can be some gray understanding your situation and that they're, you know, experiencing things and just knowing that we're going to work with you. It's kind of being flexible as Mike. And they have to, and you have to do that a couple of times with them.
But that's the real world too, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how the real world
Absolutely.
works. Yeah.
But I could give you example after example after example on different situations that we had to think outside of the box to make it work. Whereas maybe some of those other schools might not have been able to do that just because
the parameters are so hard and in place.
So an example that just happened, I had a kid that just got hired at Walmart. Super excited, needs to work, needs to bring in that income. I'm like, oh, and he was like, I can't go here. I'm out of here. I'm like, whoa. No, hold on. You're not out. Let's sit
Time
down.
out.
Let's reevaluate.
Let's have a
sit down.
conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And in his mind, he was done. He was out. And I'm like, no, hold on. We can make this work. So I said, all right, what's your schedule? show me your Walmart schedule. So he had Tuesdays and Thursdays that we can make work in the morning. I'm like, okay, let's have you come here Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning. Try to work on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday evenings if you can, and maybe a little on the weekend. We'll make it work. And so he only needs like 9 credits. So it's like, there's no way.
You're
so close.
No way.
You're so close.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to think long term.
Right.
Right. My prefrontal cortex
Right.
isn't formed.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And kids, right? They can't see past what's happening in front of them right now. But we as adults know, like that high school diploma, like life is not going to get any easier.
Right.
If you leave West Ada, you leave us and you don't have that diploma. So I think, you know, having that out of the box thinking and the ability to be flexible in that setting is key for kids.
And that's the fun part, right? When I get to shake their hand at graduation, I'm like, I remember that time you were about to peace out on
bail.
them.
Yeah.
And so that's where that whole process from beginning to end is really cool. Right.
Yeah, and that trust, that's right there. You just built a huge trust with that kid, like he cares.
I've got your back.
I care about
and
you.
we're talking about culture, building culture in the schools, and we're talking a lot about adult and student relationships. But do we do very much at the academies or Rebound to kind of foster some relationships between students to still have that kind of high school experience or have some kind of activities together or things like that? Or is it really pretty an individual journey as they're coming through?
Well, I'll have to speak for you. It's a pretty individual journey. However, we have Sources of Strength, which is an awesome program. And the kids love it because they get they work with the counselors and they do all kinds of cool projects.
Right.
So we have that, and they get to be pulled out of their lab and their class, and they kind of love that, right? It's a little break. And a lot of times it's art and hands-on type stuff. So they're doing really cool stuff. So that's one piece. And then we have student council, which is, it's hard to get participation.
Yeah, varies on level of
It
interest.
varies on
yeah.
level, but we'll always have a handful of kids that love doing that stuff. So we try to make it happen.
Yeah.
And they help, get us all fired up for our assessments. Going back right? We have to get them excited to take the test that they probably don't really want to be
care
taking.
about it,
And so the student council and sources of strength really help on getting us fired up.
Well, okay, I'm going to ask a dumb question. I'm going to be honest with you, and it could be incendiary.
No dumb questions.
Well, so we talked about mastery learning and no failing grades and how that works. Listen, there was a time in my life where I'd have been like, oh no, we've got to, there needs to be a standard in a bar, and there was a time in my life, younger, I would have said that. That would have been my perspective. I don't feel that way anymore. But can you talk to that a little bit? Like, there are people I'm sure listening going who have my perspective. How do you answer that attitude, Kristen, I guess?
Well, in the mastery-based learning system, the students work on what's called the continua. So really, they're never going to fail because they're going to keep the only way I guess it would be fail is if they didn't complete it, right?
Okay.
So
they just stopped trying.
They just stopped trying.
Right.
But we're not. You would continue to work through what's called that continua, the skills for learners, the standards that are needed until they reached the point in which they earned the credit. So when you talk about there really is no failing grades in this system, because it just doesn't. It's not set up that way for students. They just keep on the journey until they get where it is, and they can also. Those skills, they can meet them in quite a different content areas. Because when I'm doing English, I might also, I'm doing some skills that might also qualify for my speech credit or for studies. Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of crossover. And being new to this position, I'm still learning it all as well. Yeah,
that's the fire hose thing, right? Yeah.
But they're really students don't because it's mastery based. So once I've shown to a degree of mastery, then I've earned my credit.
Well, really, the goal of education is that we learn and are able to know and do these skills, right? Not that you can regurgitate information. So to an extent, probably all of our educators across the district are working towards that mastery. Let's make sure you know this before you move on.
Yeah. And if it happens in week 2 or week 7, as long as the learnings happen. And the other thing to keep in mind is the road that those kids had to go through to get to here, they had a bumpy road. So there's a lot of things going against them on their path, right? So if I just wanted to be a hard nose and fail everyone.
Our kids aren't robots.
And listen, that I'm using air quotes, but that dumb perspective that I'm voicing, I had such a privileged. Are you kidding me? I haven't faced what these kids have faced, and I think understanding that is part of my lifelong learning, right?
Implicit bias.
Well, and you kind of touched on this earlier, but soft skills, you're talking about the kid going to Walmart, Mike. What other soft skills are you teaching them to be hey, life is more than just this? How do you work on that?
So we're always working on accountability, right, and punctuality, all these things that we're trying to prepare them for their later jobs, right?
Right.
And so those are things that every adult, I think, at all the academies are probably always working. That is actually, if you look at it, can be more important than some of the other things, right? If I can get you to work on time every day, give it your best effort, punctuality, right? That punctuality is a big one lately. Seems like,
and maybe even talking to adults too, right? The relationships they're building with you might help them in their future career to be able to speak with others. You need to look people in the eye and be able to introduce yourself. You have to interview at some point. Yeah,
and I do love it, and I'm pretty sure maybe the academies, but at Rebound, our senior project, we still have senior project, but it's all career based. It's all job future based. There's a whole section on soft skills that they're actually learning in their senior year English class, which is awesome too. So it's also embedded in the
actually kind of embedded in the curriculum
kind
of thing. Yeah. Your perspective on that, Kristen?
Yeah, I think I was just in a meeting with a principal the other day, and we talked about how important, and I was in on a meeting with a senior about just communicating. Being able to come in and say, this is what is going on, right? As adults, if I go into my boss and I say, hey, this is what's going on.
Advocating and all the things,
Yeah, like being able to communicate and let people know what's going on, 99% of the time, people will work with you. And in life, that's with everything. People will work with you if they know what's going on. But if you just decide that you're going through something and you just can't come to school and then you just ghost everybody that's trying to get a hold of you and you don't communicate, there's a story that goes on in our head. And most of the time, it's not in your favor. But if you communicate,
distortion,
if you communicate and let us know what's going on, we will work with you.
Sure.
We try to, I guess that's where being reasonable. Try and be reasonable with kids. If you're willing to say, adulting 101, let's communicate.
I'm still working on that, but I'm with you.
What great lessons you're teaching them. Now, I'm curious how this year we instituted a district-wide cell phone policy. Now, does that apply the same to academies and Rebound? And are you seeing kind of a good turnout from that? A good
Go ahead, Mike.
Well,
he loves
all right.
talking
be
about
real.
this.
You can be real.
I'll be honest. So we've been doing this at Rebound for a long time.
Oh, okay.
Like 6
Old
or
hat.
7 years. Like
Oh.
doing it. It's a long story, but I could see right away. I was like, we got to get the cell phones out of here. Like especially when we're asking them to work online, right? And now they do a lot of listening to videos. I need them.
You got to be dialed in.
I need them engaged in the
Yeah.
instructions.
And you only have them for 3.5 hours a day.
Right,
so
right.
That's,
So you're already condensed. Yeah.
So that it's been from the first year we did go to that. I was like, oh, we're where we need to be, because I saw our courses. Our course completion rate was going up. Our graduate
the
rate
data was totally backing it up.
100%.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's been a piece of cake for us.
So now your colleagues are across the district.
Correct,
You're like,
like,
hey,
yeah.
now
Mike,
you know.
how you
should have
doing this,
called me
man?
6 years ago.
Yeah.
But
Right.
no, but what it does for us is, now that we're all doing it, now I can say we're all doing it, right? Instead of it was just
Mr. Hanneman, the
correct.
hard
You
nose.
had to be the bad guy.
I'm the
right?
bad guy at that
Yeah.
school that doesn't let them have their phones. But it's been great. I love it.
Well,
Fully believe in it.
I'm trying to kind of put a bow on our conversation a little bit. I think, I'm sure there are parents out there listening going, oh, holy cow, I'm dealing with all this stuff with my kid. What would you say? What advice would you give, Kristen, maybe to the parent out there going, would my kid be a good fit at one of the academies or one of our alternative
First
plans?
step, maybe.
Yeah. They can reach out to the counselor at their home school. That would probably be a first step. They're more than welcome to call me as well. I would love to talk to parents. I can be, very just definitely lay it out and not try and be biased.
Do you care if I put your
way.
email in the show notes? Do you mind if I do that?
No,
okay,
no.
I'll do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
they definitely can reach out. But I think having that your school counselor will know the best picture of their current situation and what it is that they're facing, and if that might be an option. And there is a piece the counselor has to do as well with that if they want to fill out an application. So I think starting there would be a good starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no shame. It's awesome.
100%.
It's just another one of our school. We have CTE. We have schools of choice. I think school choice is a really great option for our students and families.
Absolutely. And I will, I'm in the diploma that comes from Rebound, Meridian Academy, Central Academy, Eagle Academy, it holds the same. It's the exact
Amen.
same. It is the exact same. It just says
You
Eagle
have
Academy,
your
but
diploma.
right.
Yeah.
You have your diploma. Sometimes people will ask, if it's different, if it means something different. It does not. The state recognizes it exactly as from Hawaii or Mountain View or Rocky, any of those. So it's exactly the same.
That's cool.
That's cool. Anything anything you want to share that we maybe missed or important?
Did we do our job for once?
I think you went quite in detail on alternative schools for sure.
Wow.
Well, I'm grateful for the work you guys do
Yes.
and making sure that all our kids have an opportunity to be successful. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. There's a need. So I'm glad that we're able to definitely fill that need for those students.
Thank you for what you do. Sincerely. Can't
awesome.
thank you enough. Appreciate you being here today as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
See you at graduation.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Do it again.
Can't wait, man. Let's
do
do
it
this.
again.
I love it. Thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, can you just tell that those two have an amazing heart for kids?
Yeah, I said that in there. You can't teach a disposition or a heart for kids, and these two certainly embody that.
Well, so much fun. And listen, thank you for being here. As always, thank you for listening. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's Spotify or Google, Amazon. If you listen on iTunes, please rate us and leave a review. Or if you like to watch, you can always watch the podcast on our YouTube channel. Please go there and subscribe. this week's question, and we really want to hear from you all. The question: what assumptions do you have about "quote unquote" those kids? If you're just listening, I'm using air quotes. Those kids, these at-risk kids that we're serving in our academies. What assumptions do you have about them? And were you even aware of our West Ada Academies before this podcast? We'd love to hear what you have to say about that. Whether you're seeing this podcast on our social media or, as always, feel free to send us an email at communicate@westada.org. And you can also learn more and listen to our past podcasts at westada.org/podcast. So there's some cool content there and some more cool content kind of coming.
There is. Yeah. So kind of keeping with those educational options that we have for all of our kids. Our next podcast, we're going to be talking with Kelly Knowles and Jamie Giebler. They are two inspired educators really who are running a new option flyers, and it's for our elementary population. So students need to qualify to be there, but it really just gives them the supports and tools they need to be successful at their home schools.
It's a brand new school for our K through 5 students, and it's just something we've literally just launched. And so anyway, we're going to give you some information there about a really cool new opportunity as well.
It'll be a great conversation, I'm sure. And thanks for listening to the West Ada podcast, and we'll see you next time.